This is ESBR Boxing. Delighted to be joined by Elliot Grigg and Owen McKendry. We are here talking about the big fight breakdown of Jai Opetaia against Mairis Briedis, the rematch taking place in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, May 18th. Obviously, the co-main event to the huge undisputed world heavyweight title fight between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk. But we're not talking about that fight. This video is all centered around the Cruiserweight contest for the vacant IBF world title. We're going to talk about various different topics here, chaps, some of which you prepared for, some of which I might throw on you spontaneously. Who knows? The first thing I wanted to ask both of you, but I'll come to Owen first, is regardless of, obviously we're talking about prior to this fight, do you believe that Jai Opetaia is the single best cruiserweight in the world?
Comfortably. I think the fact he's not still a world champion is, we won't get into it because that's a 20-minute long video in itself, and the disgraceful politics, obviously similar to what happened with Joe Cordina and the IBF. I think if you look at the world champions at the level, you've got Chris Billum-Smith, who, let's be honest, would last about 3 rounds with Opetaia. You've got Noel Mikhailian, I think is how you say it, whose best wins are 40-year-old Lunga Makabu. Briedis he's already beat once. I think he beats him again. And then you've got Gilberto Ramirez, who again hasn't got the best record. He beat Goulamarian, but when he stepped up to your elite level, he lost to Bivol and beat sort of a downward spiral Joe Smith. So I think it's crazy to say Jai Opetaia wouldn't be the best cruiserweight on the planet. And I think he sweeps through Briedis, and I think he sweeps through the whole division.
I don't even think I need to come to you now, Greg, really. Owen's just basically summed up the whole video there. He said how he would fight the rest of the champions. He's given his prediction and all. We can just wrap it up there. But no, in all seriousness, what do you think, Elliot? Do you agree with what Owen said there?
Yeah, Owen said, he thinks Opetaia is comfortably the best in the division, and I'm comfortable in agreeing with him, frankly. I don't think there's anyone really that, I mean, to be honest with you, I still think Opetaia's main threat is Lawrence Okoli. Obviously, he's moving up, so I think at Cruiserweight, he'd actually present the toughest challenge for Jai Opetaia. I don't think there's anyone, like Owen mentions some of those names in that division, I don't think there's anyone actually close to Jai Opetaia. And we can pick up, I suppose, a bit about the fight through this video. But yeah, I think comfortably, far and away, the best cruiserweight currently in the world.
I would tend to agree with both of you. I think, when you run through the champions, even as you mentioned, Gilberto Ramirez just beat Goulamarian. Like, he's not a cruiserweight to start off with. He was fighting super middleweight not that long ago. Yes, I know he's very tall and stuff, but he's not a cruiserweight. Elliot, you and I have talked about him and Jaime Munguia before. We talked about him and Jaime Munguia before having the 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 biggest and most padded records in boxing. Then obviously you've got, as you mentioned, CBS, who's fighting Richard Riakporhe. Remains to be seen what happens in that fight. And then, as you mentioned, McKaylin that beat Makabu. I think it's fair to say Opetaia does, in my opinion, as well, beat them all. So it's hard not to have him as the number one at cruiserweight by some distance. This is obviously a rematch, chaps. And coming back to you first, Elliot. First time around, Opetaia won in July 2022. He won by a unanimous decision, outboxed Briedis, when a lot of people didn't know who Jai Opetaia was and saw it as quite a big upset at the time. In terms of tactics and what Briedis has to do this time around, what does he have to do if he's to have his hand raised on May 18th and can he become a 3-time world cruiserweight champion?
I mean, for me, Paul, I'm not even going to sit here and talk tactics. I think Briedis has somehow got to catch Opetaia cold, frankly. I think there's the only chances he's got. He's got power and he's got 20 KOs and 28 victories, so he carries a punch, but I think that's his only chance, frankly, so if he somehow manages to catch him. Look at the age of Briedis as well, 39 years old. Like you say, I mean, he's got a good record, Briedis. You look through the people he's fought and the champions he's fought, you look at that record, it goes been with some credible opposition. Possibly more so in some ways than Opetaia, but obviously Opetaia's on the rise, and I feel like I just feel like the only hope he's going to have is if he just catches him. I don't think he's going to outbox him. So it's just a question here whether he can catch him cold, and that's the only chance I'll give him, frankly.
Interesting. So you're saying that Mairis Briedis, really his only way of winning is by knockout. It's very interesting. I'll come to you in a second, though, but you look at Briedis, as you mentioned, 28-2, 20 stoppages, but he is 39 now, as you correctly alluded to there, Elliot. The two defeats on his resume are a majority decision loss to Usyk, but that was over 6 years ago now. It was January 2018. And then obviously the Opetaia is the only other one to beat him in that unanimous decision. He does have some good wins. He actually has a win over one of the current champions, Mikhailjan. Obviously, that's Briedis has beaten him. So we were talking there about how Opetaia would fare against the rest of the division. He is a former unified champion himself, but yeah, at 39, Owen, and having not fought since not so fought since the Opetaia, the first fight, and just kind of hanging about. Do you think the writing's on the wall for Mairis Briedis, or what does he have to do differently this time around? If I tell you he's going to win, how does he do it?
I think it's near on impossible, to be quite honest, for Briedis to win. He's 39, hasn't fought for 2 years, broke Jai Opetaia's jaw early in the first fight, and still got comfortably outboxed for. I think they said he broke Opetaia's jaw in maybe the third or fourth round, so he comfortably got outboxed for 8 rounds by someone who he'd split his jaw in half. For me, when you look at it like that, unless it's a punch from the gods, I genuinely physically can't see a way he even wins this fight. I think it's clear to see Opetaia can take a punch, he can deal with adversity. And that was it. That was his coming out fight. That was his first big sort of name, his first big fight, and adversity of stepping into almost the lion's den and getting your jaw broke and still coming out on top is a pretty impressive feat. So yeah, unless he catches him like Greg said, he has to be caught so cold. That's for me, that's physically the only way he's gonna do it, and it really would be a punch from the gods.
Coming straight back to you, Owen. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'll come back to my next question I was going to ask, but I'm jumping ahead of myself. At ASBR here, we do like to call it going full McKendry. So I think you know what's coming next. But you're talking there about Briedis, and the word you used there is basically impossible for him to win this fight. Do you then make it? Do you just think he's completely past his best, and we've seen the best of Mairis Briedis? And the question I want to ask you is, as our retirement guru, is retirement on the cards for Mairis Briedis if he loses this fight?
Surprisingly, I think depending on how he comes out of this fight, if Jai Opetaia runs through him and smashes him up, then you're saying you're 40 odd years of age. What have you got left? But when you look at the champions, if he puts up a fight, if he wins some rounds here and there, you'd favour him against a Chris Billam-Smith or a Riakporhe, in my opinion. So I think if the cruiserweight division was a bit more stacked, had some more names in it, then you're thinking at 40, two big defeats, what's left? But I really think if he can come out of it with some form of light, even if it's 3 or 4 good rounds against Opetaia, then I still think there's fights for him at cruiserweight that are winnable. I think he's lucky, to be honest, in terms of it's one of the poorer cruiserweight divisions, and I think from what we've seen, if he has another run at the champions, Opetaia could be off at heavyweight. So yeah, I think unless he gets brutally beaten up, then I do still think there's some decent fights and winnable fights left for him at the sort of top level of cruiserweight.
Very interesting. Do you concur, Elliot, or are you going a wee bit more harsh? Are you saying put your feet up and hit the beach if you lose this?
Yeah, I can't go full McKendry if the man himself's not going there. I actually totally agree with him. Actually, I think I do think there's more fights for Briedis possibly at cruiserweight. I do think he's very, very right to say as a division it is quite a weak division. For example, if I was to turn around here and go, Chris Billam-Smith's fighting Briedis, who would I back to win that fight? I might even back Briedis, to be perfectly honest with you. So it's like, and Billam-Smith's a world champion. If I look at that and go Mairis Briedis, I'd probably back Briedis in that as well. So it's a case really of he's unlucky. Like Owen said, he's unlucky that he's having to contest a world title against Jai Opetaia. But equally, there are other fights in there for him as long as he doesn't get badly hurt here, I suppose, or damaged in such a way that he doesn't want to necessarily continue. I definitely think he can continue against some of those lesser names in the division. Yeah, I 100% agree with Owen.
Even though neither of you are sending him into retirement, do you still think he's past his best? Or, as you say, is it just unfortunate that he ran into a man called Jai Opetaia? Elliot, you first.
Yeah, I think I'd be unless you'll like this Paul, this reference here and probably get cut out in editorial, but unless he's on the Canelo Alvarez kind of snacks as it were, the Ingles Pringles, then I think you'd have to say at 39 years old he is on the slide. But I think whether he has a sort of enough know-how to sort of be credible at the division, I do think that he does. But you can't sit here and say he's improving or at his peak. He is definitely on the slide, and I think it's a case really then of me also thinking and going, any man who's in active at the upper echelons of a division in the way that Briedis was, calling out Jake Paul, for me that was a man who was on the slide right there and then. I couldn't take him seriously after that point, and I think that's a man who knew he was on the slide, and that was a sort of desperate sort of cry for more money at that point. But yeah, I do think he's on the slide, but I do still, as Owen alluded to and stated as well, I do think he's still got enough about him to potentially beat some of those younger fighters in the division who actually aren't as good, even at the level he is on now, whilst being on the slide.
Are you in agreement, Owen?
Yeah, I think Greggy's hit the nail on the head there. I mean, you look at how big the Usyk fight was, and that was what, 6 years ago, and he was 32, 33 then. If he was a bit of more of a spring chicken when he fought Usyk, then he still got some gas left in the tank. But even like the Christoph Glavacki and Dortmund wins were sort of 4 or 5 years ago now. So I think he's definitely past his best. Like Greg said, as much as you hate to say it, unless he's on any illegal substances, you can't really see him generating more power, strength, going for a full sort of run at the titles again. So yeah, I think he's definitely past his best, but because of, as we've both said, the cruiserweight division, I don't think him being past his best means he's finished.
Very interesting, very interesting. Going back to Opetaia, I was about to say the champion, but not really, as the belt is vacant, as we all know what happened there. But looking at Opetaia, the A side, let's say the favourite here, Elliot, do you think he can stop Briedis this time around? Do you expect him to stop him, or could Briedis pick up a few rounds, and could we be destined for 12 again?
Oh, tough question. You know what? I actually think Briedis could pick up a few rounds. Yeah, I definitely think he's good enough to pick up a few rounds. But I think he's going to get stopped. Yeah, frankly, I think it'll be probably second half of the fight. But I can see if Opetaia's got the appetite for it and he wants it, I reckon he could stop Briedis this time around, definitely. And I'll go somewhere sort of 7+. I think he might concede a few rounds early, but I think, like we said, like the age is one thing. The fact that he's obviously Opetaia's getting better, and I think Briedis is declining. Briedis might go into survival mode at some point. He might do, but if Opetaia really wants it and he's got that sort of spite about him, I think he stops him sort of 7 to 9, somewhere around that range.
Very, very interesting. What about you? And
Without giving my prediction, I think he can.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, I'll ignore that last 2 seconds of what you said. But yeah. What about you, mate? Do you think without again? I kind of know your prediction based on what you've said
Yeah.
already, but can he, can he stop Briedis, or is Briedis good enough and seasoned enough and still capable enough to go the full 12?
I think I can see both aspects of it, but I do definitely think Opetaia can stop him. The first fight was the first time a lot of people on these shores had seen who Jai Opetaia was. Opetaia and his team himself, after the Briedis fight, sort of said, with the jaw break, a bit of adversity, did he hold back slightly? Possibly. Normally that's an excuse for a loss, but when someone wins and wins comfortably and says that, you sort of stand up and listen. And then, he's done two sort of mandatories in Jordan Thompson and Ellis Zorro. And I think the Jordan Thompson was the biggest showing in levels I've ever seen in boxing. It was incredible. And the same with Ellis Zorro. It was just levels and just pure ease. So I think Briedis is now coming up against a hungrier, a more confident, a little bit more seasoned Jai Opetaia, whilst he's on the aging side. So when you factor all those in together, I think although Briedis is clever enough and probably still good enough to nick a few rounds and survive, I just think you're looking at a beast in Opetaia who's going to hunt Briedis down. And yeah, definitely stoppage is on the cards.
Well, you've said that the stoppage could be on the cards and that he can stop him, but will he, Owen? What is your final prediction for Jai Opetaia and Mairis Briedis, the rematch?
Highly confident Jai Opetaia stops him. Echoing what I've just said, I think it could be a bit earlier. It could be sort of your 5, 6, 7, that mark. I think Opetaia, we've seen him, the confidence. He doesn't come bursting out the blocks. He's just clever in what he does. You've seen it against Jordan Thompson. Although we know his levels above, it was an awkward fight for him. I couldn't believe how big Jordan Thompson actually was at that press conference. He's like 6'7" or something ridiculous, and Opetaia he just breezed through him. I just think we are looking at a dangerous man in terms of he's had his belt taken off him. There's just so many elements and factors that I keep thinking and adding on to it that makes me think he's just going to run through him like an absolute steam train. I think it'll be a bit tentative at the start, and then I think Opetaia will have his number. And I think when he piles the pressure on, I think that's when we get a stoppage. So sort of round 6, round 7 for me.
Very good, mate. Very good. Elliot, you kind of alluded to the fact earlier that you think he could force the stoppage, Jai Opetaia, in the second half of the fight. You maybe were even a little more concise with your 7-9. Is that your prediction as well? How do you see this one going down on May 18th?
Yeah, I'll nail my colours that mast. I do see it. I do see an Opetaia stoppage. Frankly, I mean, like Owen said, the performances against Thompson and Zorro, I mean, especially the one against Zorro, was frightening. I mean, that was a monstrous punch that he hit him with there. And if I was actually Briedis, I would actually probably be thinking slightly about survival as well as getting the opportunity to sort of a marquee victory. So I actually think maybe Briedis will make it a bit cagey. But I do think that Opetaia, and it is a great word that Owen used, I think he'll hunt him down, frankly. And I think he'll get to him somewhere around sort of 7-9. Yeah, maybe a bit later if Briedis wants to sort of dig in and wants to survive, maybe more towards the 9 area. But I definitely see him getting stopped, yeah.
Interesting. I'll give my prediction too. I mean, it sounds harsh. We're kind of almost writing off a two-time former
Mm.
unified cruiserweight champion, but that just goes to show, the level at which we have Jai Opetaia right now. I agree, he's the best cruiserweight in the world right now. I think he'll further solidify himself as the best 200-pound fighter in the world on May 18th. I'm going for a stoppage as well. We're conclusive in the stoppages. And you know what? I can't really disagree with the rounds you're given. I mean, if I was looking at it from a betting perspective, I'd probably go between rounds 5 and 8. The middle third of the fight. So I'm kind of in agreement with you. Around 6, 7, 8. I see Jai Opetaia getting the Briedis. I think this video's turned into the Jai Opetaia show, let's be honest. But it's hard not to admire just how good he is. And I think, yeah, I agree with you, chaps. I think he'll just show once again, further emphasize why he is the number one in the division at cruiserweight. And yes, be sure to check out the rest of the content on the channel, guys. We'll have myself and Elliot have our own breakdown of this fight, a preview. Also, a big exclusive interview with the man himself on the channel, and as well as all the rest of the content. We've got our Fury Usyk content, plenty of other stuff, massive fights. Looking ahead at June 1st as well with the Queensberry match from 5v5 and Bivol Beterbiev. All of that coming up, guys. So make sure you check out all of that and drop us a like, share, subscribe, all of that caper. And yes, thanks very much for watching. And Elliot and Owen, appreciate your time as always, chaps.
Thank you very much, mate. And as always, thank you very much, guys, for watching.